Hello everyone, I am Nico from Edenimi. Today we will start our journey to learn Python, one of the most popular programming languages today. So, let's get started. First, we'll discuss basic syntax of Python, a few ins and outs that we will need to talk about when we're first starting our journey. And then we'll discuss data types, which are essentially like the nouns, verbs, and adjectives in regular languages. Programming languages have data types like integer and float, and we'll go over those, but they help us comprise our programming language. And after we talk about the data types, we'll have some exercises based on what we discussed. So, basic syntax. To assign a variable, we use an equal sign. Such as here, we're assigning the variable myInt. We're giving it the value 100. Now, if we want to show the equality of two things, we use two equal signs. That is different from assigning a variable. It's an important thing to note. If we want to show equality, we use two equal signs. And if things are not equal, then we use exclamation point equal sign. So, for example, here, if I wanted to say variable is equal to 20, that would be assigning a variable the value of 20. And if I wanted to say that variable is equal to 39, would that be a true statement or a false statement? Obviously, that would be a false statement. So we can even run this program, right? And it'll tell us that it's false. But if we said variable is not equal to 39, that would be a true statement. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that Python cares about spaces, tabs, and white space. So spaces and tabs are pretty self-explanatory. This like this would be a tab, this is a space. Now it's very important to always have continuity within your files and your project, because if you have a mixture of spaces and tabs in your file, it's going to throw an error. Okay. And white space, I'll give you an example of white space. So if I wanted to kind of make a function, right? We'll talk about this in another lesson, but what a function does. But one of the things for defining a function is you say def and then you say function and then you go to another line. See this right here? This is the white space. And that is very important in Python. So for example, if I say, you know, that's going to throw an error, because in Python, the white space needs to be there for the function. Okay. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And if I were to do another thing, let's say instead of a tab here, I did a space, I did spaces, and I did the same exact thing, this would give me an error because this one used a tab to create the white space, and then this line used spaces to make the white space. So always pay attention to that when you're developing in Python. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are a number of reserved words in Python that can be used as variables. So for example, if I were to run a program and I wanted to make a variable named in. If you look at the idle, it made it in orange because that's something that's a reserved word. So if I were to say in is equal to 100, if I try to run this, yes, yep, we get an error, invalid syntax. So this is a word that's reserved. Also, if I wanted to use something like for, it's also a reserved word. I run it, invalid syntax. Okay, so I'll put a list of reserved words or a link to all the reserved words in the description of the video. But it's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're naming your variables. Okay. The next thing is the print statement. So what print does is it outputs things for us. So if I had that integer variable back, my int is equal to 100, and I wanted to output that to the screen in the program after I execute it, what I would do is I would say print, and I could put anything. I could put, a string like I just did, or I could do even the variable I created, my int. So I would run this after saving, and then we look over here, my int was output. Okay. So that's what we use the print statement for. And then we also have type. Now, what type does is it looks at whatever you put inside the parentheses and it tells us the data type that it is. So for example, we said my int is 100. Well, we know that 100 is an integer, or a number. So if we run this, Python says it's an int. Okay. So that's what we use the type statement for. Okay. Next, we have the simplest of data types called the Boolean. It's also, you'll see it in Python referred to as a bool. So I say it's the most simplest because a Boolean really only has two possible values. It has true and it has false. So this can also be represented as two different integers. So true can also be represented as a 1, and then 0 can be represented as false. And this can be used for logic expressions. So right here in this image right here, we can say, print true is equal to false. We're looking at the logic here. True is equal to false. That's a false statement. So if we print that out, it's going to say false. Same thing here. 1 is equal to 1. That's a true statement. So if we print that out, it's going to say true. Okay. Next, we have strings. So strings are essentially a series of words or bytes used to store information. So, for example, if I have some information I want to store, what I would do is I would create a string by using either double quotes or single quotes. So if I wanted to say my string, and then I can say hello, and then I'll print this out. So I'll say print my string, and then we'll run this. And here it is, hello. Okay. So we can do this with either single quotes or double quotes. So if I do this, it's the same exact thing. But one thing to keep in mind is that in some languages, we use a parentheses or an apostrophe, I should say, to show ownership. So in English, for example, if we said Bob's computer, we have an apostrophe here. So what that's going to do in Python, if we use single quotes to create our string, if you look at the text, you see that our string is green, right? And then these letters are black. So if I run this, it throws an error because this is what Python's seeing as the string. And then this is essentially garbage after. So if we want to use a string with an apostrophe within the string, then remember that we have to use double quotes. Now, if you look at it, it's all green and we don't have an error, right? Bob's computer. Okay. Another neat thing within Python is that we can add strings. So if I said my string is Bob's, and then I said your string is computer, right? We could say print my string plus your string. Okay. And then right here, we have Bob's computer. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind, if you didn't notice before, is that you can make comments in Python using the hashtag sign, and the interpreter will ignore this essentially. So if we want to make a program, it's generally good practice. We say what we're doing within that program with comments, right? So we say, we are learning Python. Okay. And then, we can say what we're trying to do here, right? So we're going to say, print some strings, for example. And this kind of just makes your code a lot easier to follow for someone that's never seen it before. So it's a general good practice to get as a habit as you get started. Next, we have integers, which are pretty straightforward. They're just whole numbers that are positive or negative or zero. So 100, 1, -500, as long as they're whole numbers, they're represented by integers, and they're called ints as well. So when you print, as I showed before, right? When you print the type of an integer, it's called an int. Okay. Next, we have a float. So a float is a non-whole number. You can think of it as a number with decimal places. So pi, for example, 3.141, that has a decimal place 0.0. It can be positive or negative, but if it has decimal points and it's not a whole number, then it would be considered a float. So like my float is equal to we'll say 100.01, right? And then we can even say print type of my float. Okay, and we'll run that, and it says float. Okay. So here's where the fun starts. This data type is called a list. It's also called an array. And you can kind of think of an array as a container that holds data. So for example, the values within this list can be anything. And we denote it with square brackets. So if you think about it, right? Think about a container with a bunch of slots in it. So if I wanted to make a list of items, right? Let's say I wanted to do this as my first, right? So 3.0, right? That would be within the first slot. And then the second slot is 1. The third slot is actually a list with one item in it, number 4. And then the next item is 1. That's the next slot. And then the next slot is actually a string. It says salam. Like this, we can use a list. And to access an item in a list, we have to specify the index. So the way that programming languages, many programming languages, including Python, the way they work is that when you count, you start from 0. So here's index 0, index 1, index 2, and 3. That's also right here, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the way we access items within our list is we say the name of the list, and then we use the square brackets and the index. So if I create a list right here, right? If I say my list is equal to, we'll say, hi, how are you? Right? That's a list with 2 items in it. And we'll say print my list. And let's say I want to only say, how are you? I don't want to say hi. So if we count, right, this is index 0, this is index 1. So I have to say my list 1 square brackets, right? And then we can print that, right? How are you? Okay. Also, if I wanted to do, let's see, I can say also just print list, and it'll print exactly this, right? So, hi, how are you? We have the 2 items separated by a comma. Okay. All right. Next, we have a dictionary. In other languages, it's also called an object or a hash map. In Python, we say dictionary. So what a dictionary does is it basically has key value pairs, where just like a list, the values can be anything, any data type. It could be a Boolean, it could be another dictionary, it can be a list even, right? We see that here. So within our dictionary, we have on as the key, and then we have another dictionary as the value. Massage, salam. Okay. Items, just like a list, items within the dictionary are separated with commas. Okay. And we can access values by using the key. So just like a dictionary in real life, right? We look up a word and then we find the definition, right? We do the same thing with dictionaries, right? So we have Birdikt right here. Birdikt senin is the key. So senin, and then it would print this list, right? We can see that right here. So if I say, right, right, here's my empty dictionary, and then I'll say Benim is the first key, and then 1 is the value. Senin is the second key, and the value will be a list. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then on, right? and the value will be another dictionary where the key is massage and salam is the value. Okay, so let's say that I want the list, right? If I want to get that value, what needs to happen is I say print Benedict, and I use square brackets, just like accessing the indices of a list, except I need to name the key. So if I want the list right here, I use setting, right? So setting, okay, and then I close the parentheses. Okay, and let's run that. Ooh, I have an error. Ah, yes. Okay, there we go. And then we have our list. Okay. The same thing if I wanted to access if I wanted to access this sub dictionary, then I would say Onun here, right? Okay. And take a note, right? Each item separated by commas, right? Okay. So now that we've talked about the basic data types of Python, let's do a few exercises. So I would like you to look at this and think about what data type is going to result from this print statement. So we assign var this value, and if we print the type of var, what would be the output? Please do that for every single question here. And you can leave your answers in the comments, or you could ask questions in the comments. Okay. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.